This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
All right, here's the deal, Real Talkers. If you call Edmonton home, or if Edmonton is relevant to you, then I think this episode is going to be really relevant to you because one of Edmonton's most popular and longest-serving city councillors has announced that he won't seek re-election next year. Well, actually, technically, Andrew Knack has announced he won't seek re-election as an Edmonton city councillor next year. And of course, I'm going to dig, and get the truth on this episode of the show. We've always had wonderful conversations with Councillor Knack, as you know, so we'll find out why he's made this decision. He walked in. I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain. He was in the green room. I said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Yesterday, a big day. You make the announcement." He goes, "I'm still feeling kind of sad." Sad? So that's where we'll start in just a second. Plus, if you're watching us live, I want you to check out our official Twitter account right now at Real Talk RJ. Johnny, typically we put, just a couple of moments before we live stream on YouTube and on Mixlr. We let folks know who's going to be on the show. We put that tweet out, but we've put out a poll today, which we don't do every day, but I kind of like it. We announced that Knack will be here for sure, but then we also note this story that was breaking the news just after we went off the air. Our most recent episode, the 9th of September, two of the men that were involved in that Coutts border blockade, they were arrested and charged after police discovered a big cache of weapons, including pipe bombs, sentenced in an Alberta court to 6.5 years apiece. They'll probably, with time served and everything else, do a couple of more years before they're eligible for parole. But we've asked Twitter if the punishment fit the crime. And so I want to jump into our YouTube live chat in just a little bit there. We literally just hit it. So we've got 9 votes so far. Let me hit refresh and see if we've got it. We've got 10 votes right now. What would be your guess? The two options we've given folks, did the punishment fit the crime? Earmuffs, kids. Number 1, hell yeah, fuck around and find out. Or option number 2, hell no, freedom. What do you think? Did the punishment fit the crime?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Stockpiling weapons, I would think. I was thinking 5 years. I think 6.5 is a little over, but I think it's right where it should be.
Prosecutors wanted 9 years, and the defense obviously wanted less than that. But yeah, I mean, police discovered body armor, ammunition, weapons.
This was no joke. Yeah.
No joke. We'll get to that story. That's obviously a relevant one. Plus, the U.S. presidential debate's about to go down, so we'll tee this up a little bit. Should be an interesting one. I hate to use the word entertaining because it feels like the fate of the free world is at stake, and that's not something we should chuckle about, but you better believe that the ratings will be off the charts as Kamala Harris goes toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. Before we get to Andrew Knack, I want to let you know that this episode of Real Talk is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at Business Career College that are putting out a shout to senior finance professionals and financial advisors. You know by now, I hope you do, obviously, that about 3/4 of the next generation of investors say that they're keen on adding digital assets to their financial portfolios. They probably don't use the word keen, though. But they do have questions about things like Bitcoin and blockchain and NFTs and decentralized finance. And you want to know what you're talking about, and you shouldn't be learning about it from TikTok or Instagram Reels, right? That's why Business Career College, a leader in financial training since 1997, has launched a new designation. It's the CDAA, the Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation. You can learn more at businesscareercollege.com. And because you're hearing about it here, the promo code Ryan20, all one word, is going to knock 20% off that course for Real Talk audience members. That's valid till the end of September, so make sure you check it out. I don't know if I say it's the worst kept secret in Edmonton politics because Andrew Knack was holding his cards close to his chest, but there had been rumblings that the longtime Edmonton City Councillor was considering maybe walking away from City Hall, and that's exactly what he announces on the 9th of September. It's now the 10th, the morning after you've announced that you will not seek re-election as a councillor next year. You told us you're feeling a little bit sad.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's reading all the comments as they come in and seeing all the feedback. It's still really hard. This I mentioned yesterday. It's my dream job, and how many people sort of willingly give up their dream job And so that's what's making this really hard on me. And I'm sure I'll cry by the end of the interview. So
okay, well, I'll try not to make you cry, although that was always kind of the benchmark with Oprah and Barbara Walters and everybody else. But hang on. So if it's your dream job and if you're so sad to leave, then what are you doing?
I talked a little bit about this yesterday when I announced it, but I think there's a few things that have sort of resonated with me. And I've been watching what's been happening, speaking of the U.S., speaking of, federal politics. I think sometimes there are people in elected office who stay in longer than they should. and you don't want to be the one where everyone's asking themselves that, why is this guy still around? Why is he still hanging out? And so that's playing a little bit into this. But I think the other piece is there are really great people across the city. And we have some really challenging issues. And I think it would be great to have those new perspectives, some fresh ideas. While I believe the work that I've been doing is really good, sometimes it's just nice to have a different idea come forward, a different person to say, why don't we try to tackle the idea this way?
Huh. Okay. A lot of other people will say it feels like the city's on an economic collision course with some real problems looming. I think most people would probably say that, anybody that's in the know, and nobody would blame you for saying, I'm not sure I want to take this on right now. Council is going to have to make some incredibly unpopular decisions, including what people are forecasting is double-digit property tax increases over the next couple of years. You just don't have the stomach for it. You don't have the appetite for it at this stage in your career?
No, I'm not worried about that type of conversation. I mean, first, we're not going to have a double-digit tax increase, although there will still be tax increase, next year, no doubt. And yes, the rapid population growth that we're seeing.
You can't really say, by the way, sorry, that there won't be double-digit tax increases
for sure.
next year.
There's no way. There's just no way that people can handle a double-digit tax increase. So there's, council had approved a couple of years ago. We said when we made a change, it's going to be a 7%. I think that's what people expect. That's still high for a lot of people. I'm not going to deny that, but I think that's sort of the expectation people have. And even with the rapid population growth, even with the cut in provincial funding, even with all of the factors that we're seeing, to say, we need a double-digit tax increase, I think that would be way too much for people to accept.
Is there an optical issue between single and double-digit? Like, is 9.5 or 9.9? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If someone like me and a show can actually say legitimately with point to evidence and say it is a literal double-digit tax increase, is that even more problematic than 9.9?
I think it could be. I mean, before my time on council, there was, I think, an 11.5% tax increase, and I don't want to speak for the council of the day, but I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision. But I think this council recognizes that, and I heard it at the doors over the summer break while I was door knocking. People are feeling tapped out. People understand that there are unique challenges we're dealing with, but nevertheless, they're asking, okay, is there a way that maybe you do have to cut back on some services that allows you to keep that, in the single digits, while at the same time recognizing that, we still got to keep up with the growth in the city.
Okay, so I interrupted you. I had asked whether or not you still had the stomach for the grinding it out.
Oh, yeah. Again, I finish every day still overjoyed that I get to do this. It is the greatest honor one could hope for. It is something that I love every moment of it. I love the tough conversations. I love going out to community events. I love a public hearing. We had a council meeting later today. I want all of those things, and I want to keep doing them for the rest of my life. So I'm happy to have those tough conversations, but I think it is the right time for me to let someone new take over.
Like council meetings for the rest of life sounds like a prison sentence.
Oh my
to me.
Goodness, no! I love it.
Sounds like the worst nightmare that anyone could ever sentence me to. So people are going to say, well, hang on. So councillors acknowledging, and I'll note as well, you've been on the show in a couple of different contexts. Yep. You're also vice president of for Alberta municipalities for cities over 500,000. Essentially, they might call that the big cities, the two big cities, Calgary and Edmonton. So you obviously have a pretty good sense of where municipal and provincial politics are at, and we'll get into more on that in a bit. I got to ask you about the Green Line. I want to ask you about the water main collapse in Calgary, infrastructure deficits and the like. But people will say, so you're sitting here acknowledging that there's some pain to come, and a lot of businesses, and you'll say, well, you shouldn't run a city, or government doesn't run like a business, but a lot of times it has to. People will say, I'm not sure this is the time to hand over the reins to a new crop. Some people might suggest that it's the new crop that's got Edmonton City Council in a little bit of trouble.
And I would absolutely counter that, because again, there's a reason why we have had a large tax increase this year, and it's very much the decisions that I was a part of last term, right? Last term on City Council, we went through a 4-year budget from 2019 to 2022. We had the lowest property tax increases in 25 years in the city. But I've also acknowledged we kept them artificially low. Throughout the pandemic, people were very, very uncertain economic times. People didn't have employment. It was the right thing to do, but it also meant that when you keep your taxes below the rate of inflation, not even below the rate of inflation with plus population growth, but just below the rate of inflation, sooner or later you got to pay for it. So it was not this council that was the reason that we had an 8.9% tax increase this year. It was last council, because we made some pretty significant cuts in our city budget to keep taxes as low as we could to help people out. But at some point you have to pay for it. And now we're in this unique position that it's not just making up for those cuts previously. It's dealing with the fact that we've grown 100,000 people in the last 2 years. We've added the city of Red Deer within the borders of Edmonton in the last 2 years. And unlike the other orders of government, that when you see a massive population increase, you get more income taxes. Yes, you get more property taxes, but the property taxes do not outweigh the cost of the infrastructure you have to provide. So there's a net cost to Edmontonians when we see rapid population growth. So I think you cannot pin this on this council. It's the last council's decision to keep taxes as low as we did that now we have to pay for that.
Are you a man of two announcements as opposed to one? Because I think everybody, when you announce you're not seeking re-election as a councillor, was going, yeah, and?
No, there's no ready. I'm not ready to announce anything. No, I'm not running for mayor. Yes, I guess,
Well, that's an announcement.
Well, no, I mean, I guess, you can read the statement and say, yeah, it does say specifically, I'm not running for city councillor. I have no intent to run for mayor. That's not on my list. But I guess, yeah, technically I didn't say no. But
can I ask you about
Sure.
mayoral aspirations?
Yeah.
Like, there's nobody that would love their dream job of being a city councillor but have no interest in being the mayor. I don't believe that for 1 second. When Amarjeet Sohi decided to run for mayor, was that the end of Andrew Knack's journey toward seeking the office of the mayor? A lot of people have said, you have said on this show, that you wouldn't run against Sohi. But what about after Sohi? Why not?
I mean, you never want to rule something like that out, which is why, I mean, truthfully, why I wrote the statement the way I did. But, I mean, there's a lot of great people who I think want to run for mayor. A year is a long time in politics, as we know. Gosh, 6 weeks is a long time in politics. Just look at what happened in the U.S. So I would never say there's absolutely no chance I would do that. But with the people that I think are likely to run, the people who I think are considering running for mayor, I don't really feel like that's something I would need to do today. Could I consider it in the future? Maybe one day. So I'll never rule that out. But truly at this point, I mean, there's a reason I was sobbing as much as I was yesterday. For me, I'm of the opinion that I'm done on council right now. Maybe one day in the future you come back. Maybe there's something else on the horizon. But no, I'm not really thinking about mayor at this point.
Do you think so? He's going to seek re-election? Everybody's wondering.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Come
and
on,
I know. I
say
I talked to him, but I truly don't believe he's made up his mind. I think this is it's such a tough time to be in politics. I mean, I don't get nearly the same level of toxicity and hatred that he gets and many of my female colleagues get. But I mean, gosh, that's got to wear on you, right? That's got to be the draining on you. So I wouldn't blame him either way. But at this point, I truly think he hasn't decided yet. I think he is going to spend a few more months and take time to figure it out.
It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it, with another one of your council colleagues, Tim Cartmel, all but having launched his mayoral campaign. I mean, everybody knows he's running for mayor. It kind of creates an interesting dynamic, I bet, in council chambers.
I mean, first, he hasn't said anything, so I'm going to take him at his word that he truly hasn't decided yet.
Okay, well, mark my words. He wants to be mayor, and he's going to run.
I mean, there's maybe signs, but, I think we're also professionals, right? And I think that's the beauty of municipal politics over provincial and federal, is that even if somebody is seriously considering doing that, when we go into council chambers, we're able to put our egos aside, we're able to put any partisan leanings aside, and we come together and we listen to one another, we work together on complex issues. And so, yeah, maybe that's going to happen, and that can create some tension. I mean, that happened, gosh, I think about last term where one of my sitting colleagues was really openly campaigning, even though
what was that guy? Nobody remembers that guy's name. I don't remember that guy's. Who was that guy? I don't know. It's a tough one to remember.
I think I match his hairstyle, and that's about all I can remember at this point.
That's right. I have more questions for you, including the obvious one, and we'll get to that in just a second. Here's my hint. Here's my tee up, Real Talkers. Here's the hook. Councillor Knack posts on his Instagram, "Today I'm making one of the toughest decisions I'm ever going to make," and then he announces that he won't seek re-election as a councillor. And who's there but popular Edmonton MLA Janice Irwin with a comment, "Thank you for your many years of hard work, Andrew. I can't wait to see what's next." Oh, me too, Janice. So we're going to ask Councillor Knack about that in just a quick second. But first, I want to let you know that this conversation is happening with the support of Friesen Brothers, proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And the Alberta Beef Roundup is a tradition, of course, that Friesen Brothers has been maintaining, get this, since 1955. And this year it's returning with a custom cut whole hip, weighing up to 70 pounds, featuring the finest Alberta beef. The skilled butchers at Friesen Brothers handle all the cutting and the wrapping in store. Get this, made to order, just the way your family likes it. This event lasts for just 2 weeks, so make sure you check it out. There's more information online at friesen.com/Alberta Beef Roundup. Now, if you're going to pair your Alberta beef with a perfect wine, look no further than Vine Arts. Our friends down in Calgary know they've got a couple of locations, including that one on 17th Avenue that I just love. But I want to talk to you about September 14th. Coming up, they're celebrating their 1-year anniversary on Edmonton's 124th Street. It's a beautiful store. I absolutely love how they organize it. I was telling you this. Wine's not from country of origin, but by flavor profile. How great is that? So you look like a sommelier every time you shop there. Coming up on the 14th of September from noon to 7 at 109th Ave there. Enjoy 15% off the entire store, including some incredible bottles of bourbon, mezcal, scotch. They'll have snacks, samples of wine, beer, spirits, and a chance to win great prizes. Check out Vine Arts on Instagram for a chance to win in their giveaway featuring even more prizes. That's coming up Saturday, September 14th from noon to 7 p.m. at Vine Arts. All right, Councillor. Here's the deal. Most people figure that you're going to seek a seat for the Alberta NDP under new leader Naheed Nenshi in an Edmonton riding to be determined. It's obviously an interesting opportunity. It's obviously an interesting time. There's a lot of new energy in this party. True or false?
Haven't made a final decision on that, truly. But for the first time ever, I'm open to the idea of provincial politics. If you'd asked me a year ago, my answer would have been absolutely not, no chance whatsoever. The notion of partisan politics is broken right now in my mind. Provincially, federally, it's both orders of government. That system needs a complete overhaul. And yet, as I've seen some of these challenges continue on, and what appears to be just this ideological exclusive focus on a particular way of doing things, it is causing me to think a little bit differently about how do you change it. Like I think back to 2007 when I first decided to run for municipal politics. I had thought about, do I want to run provincially or federally? And at that time in 2007, I was telling myself, why would you want to do that? Parties don't listen to one another. There's no opportunity for hearing somebody from the other side. At least that's what I thought I was watching in the legislature and in Parliament. Little did I realize I would long for the days of 2007 because it's gotten worse in the legislature. It's gotten worse in Parliament. And so I've been waiting for it to change to get better. And it's only getting worse. So at what point do you finally say, okay, if you hope to see that change, can you help to impact that change? Maybe that's through running. Maybe that's through just helping in a different way. But there needs to be a fundamental shift in how partisan politics works because it is just so dysfunctional. And it's not how 90% of people operate. 90% of people operate like we do in the municipal world. You can go out to a community event. You can go to somebody's door. You can talk to them even when they're of a different partisan leaning. And you can have a real thoughtful dialogue. Yet, for some reason, when people go into the legislature, when people go into Parliament, they just feel like they have to yell at one another. They have to heckle one another. Could you imagine if I started heckling my colleagues on council in City Hall? That would be a justifiable news story, and yet we accept it every day there, and it's so frustrating.
Are you kind of surprised it doesn't happen at City Hall?
No, because that's how adults normally behave. can you go into any other workplace and start heckling your colleagues? Can you go into, like, if you did that in school, if your kid did that in school, you would be getting a call right now from the principal saying your kid's misbehaving in class. And yet we accept it like it's normal. We accept it and say, oh yeah, this is just the way politics works. You know, put on your hard hat, you know, get tough. Why? Why do we accept that? That is bad at governance. Bad ideas come from that, and it just means we're not actually accomplishing things that we need to work on. Right now, we're too focused, both provincially and federally, on governing to this small base of people instead of governing to the majority of people who have moderate positions, who might be right-leaning on one issue and then left-leaning on another issue, because that's how most people are.
Yeah, but do you think that you can operate like that with that sort of open-minded, wonderful ethos? The bedrock of this show is built upon that assumption that most regular folks have nuance introduced in their lives, but party politics doesn't really allow for flexibility there either.
It's because they keep choosing to operate that way.
But it's working. Right? Like,
but is
listen,
it?
You and I are, this is going to be a lousy debate because I'm not going to argue that politics should be nasty and horrible and chase away the best people. I lament the loss of decorum as well. I mean, it's hilarious. You're talking about that era, and we felt it was polarizing under what? The polarizing Premier Ed Stelmach, Dave Hancock, is that who we're talking about? But, you know, obviously it's working, and we see it working in the United States. We see it working in the UK. We see it working all around the world for that matter. Italy can get nasty. They can grind it out in Canada, and maybe that's because, I don't know, the general public, or at least the people that are most drawn to politics or most drawn to today's politics, are treating it like a blood sport. It's like a team sport. It's like squaring off. They love when politicians get owned. Everything is for sound bites, right? You know this.
But that's not the world. That's not the in-person world. When I go to community events like I did on Saturday and talk to human beings face to face, that's not how they operate, right? When I call somebody up on the phone, that's not how they operate. Even most emails I get, that's not how they operate. It's just because that's sort of the world. Oh yes, we have to go down that path because that's how it seems to be going. But it's so broken. We can't fix very simple, and in some case complex issues, because we're not willing to hear one another. And again, but out in the real world, like you mentioned, I'm on Alberta municipalities. When I go out to the small villages, the villages of a couple hundred people, and I talk to them about the issues that are impactful to them, you know what they talk about? They talk about infrastructure funding, being able to provide the sewer and water that they need. They talk about being able to provide amenities for their constituents, the everyday things that matter. And yet, for some reason, you know, provincially in particular, we seem to be focusing on, you know, policies about the LGBTQ plus community, and who's asking for that right now, except this very small percentage of people that are likely to vote in a leadership race. If that's how the system is going to keep working, like, at what point do the rest of us, the vast majority of us, say, you know what, let's just try something else, because this can't go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your mind's made up for sure. You're ready to go. And it's going to be Laurie Sigurdsson's riding, right? Let's just break the news here on Real Talk. Let's get real here, Councillor.
No, I have no idea if she's going to run again, right? And there's 4 ridings I overlap with in provincial politics, right? So I'd be interested to see what that world looks like. But, you know, to your point, is there a willingness for somebody to go into provincial politics and actually try to operate more like municipal government? Because if there isn't, then no, I'm not interested in that, right? If we're not willing to actually change the foundational structure of the system right now, then I don't know how I can help, because my specialty is not going in and yelling at somebody. My specialty is not going in and and ignoring somebody from the other side of the political spectrum. My specialty is trying to hear as many different voices as possible, trying to learn from as many different people as possible, and trying to do it respectfully.
Yeah, I've kind of ribbed you about this in past, like out of respect, just because you do politics differently than most. You're not the only one, but someone would be like, Knack, you dumb SOB, you this, that, the other, and you're always like, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate you taking the time to become engaged in politics. And I'm just watching this like, I don't think that most people can operate that way. You're a little bit like one of my sisters-in-law. Nobody believes that you're actually as nice as you are, but I think that you are. I think that, you'd be an asset for any political party. The question is whether or not you have the stomach for like what's going on right now. You do have an interesting perspective, don't you? I mean, like as a longtime, municipally elected official, but like doing a lot of work. I mean, most councillors are relatively familiar with the provincial government. There's some of the conversations are kind of happening between ministers and the mayor, and obviously sometimes there's no conversations at all, but your work with Alberta municipalities has given you insights that most councillors probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. And remember, even my history, I grew up very, very conservative. And sure, I'm not very, very conservative now. I would try to consider myself, depending on the issue, somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, depending on the day, depending on the topic.
If you were in BC, you might be a right-winger.
Sure, who knows, right?
But in Alberta, you're a communist.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, I guess,
me too,
right?
me too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've seen your comments.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you go across this province and you go to small, and again, I go to small villages which voted 80% in favor of the UCP. But then you talk to the actual humans there. You talk to the actual councillors there, the mayors there. They're not dead set partisan folks who are just like, this is the way we must do it. We are right wing and right wing only, even though they, clearly most of them probably did vote for the Conservatives. They're thoughtful individuals who actually, just like most municipal politics, I don't think I'm unique. That's the thing. Municipal politics, most of us go into this with an open mind, wanting to be respectful with one another. And that's what most people do across this province. And in particular in the smaller cities and the smaller towns and in the villages. I mean, these are folks that don't get paid nearly enough for what they do. It's pretty much a volunteer job in most cases. And yet they go out of their way to be thoughtful, to try to bring folks into conversations, to try to understand different perspectives, including the small minority of people who probably did vote for the NDP in those villages and in those towns, and yet they work to try to bring everyone together. And I love seeing that, and it's a great reminder that municipal politics is what we can do everywhere else. It's just we've chosen not to.
I know you've got a big heart for your riding. I should give a shout out to Ward Nakota Isga. And I suspect you wouldn't just strand your riding. Do you feel like you're leaving it in good hands? Will you be endorsing a candidate in this riding in the upcoming municipal election?
Possibly. I mean, it really depends on who ends up putting their name forward, but I wouldn't rule it out by any chance. I want to make sure there's good people. I know there's good people thinking about running. My hope is that they put their name forward, and if they do, I could very much see myself choosing to endorse somebody, not as a councillor, of course, because but just as an individual. And I know that's a weird thing, but we actually have to separate our hats. We can't endorse people as councillors. So if I were to endorse somebody, I'd be endorsing somebody as Andrew Knack, the human, not
sure. Yeah. What does Andrew Knack, the human, make of the rumor mill suggesting that maybe it could be a team member of yours, somebody that has experience at City Hall already? Could you see that happening?
I mean, we've seen that in other cities. I mean, that's certainly possible. I think about Councillor Evan Spencer on Calgary City Council came from working within the offices. I think about former Councillor Kim Cruchel, who used to work in offices. So there's certainly a history of that happening, but wait to see, right?
You're working this poker face hard this morning. You're doing an all right job,
Thank
though.
you. I usually don't have a good poker face.
Are you pretty impressed with our rumor mill and what we're coming up with?
I'm excited to hear all these ideas.
All over the place.
I figure you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't have that. So,
what would you say to the person that spit out their coffee like a minute and a half ago, and they went, Andrew Knack said he's conservative. This council's nothing but lefties. All they care about is paper straws and planting trees, and meantime downtown's going to hell in a handbasket. What do you say to the folks that? And there is loud and consistent criticism of this council along those lines.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think back to this notion of conservative or liberal or New Democrat or socialist or whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, think back to my time on council, and I humble brag for a moment, like there was no member of council that put forward more motions successfully to reduce spending in the city than I did on my time on council, even though there were quote unquote fiscal hawks who we always talked about as the fiscal hawks. When it came to things like allowing ride sharing, I was a champion of that. That's my libertarian bent, is that, let's give more people the option of how they want to move. Let's give people more options in the housing that they choose to live in. That's why I really was a champion of the zoning bylaw. But yeah, at the same time, there's absolutely social issues that I've been on that. So I can see where that comes from. But focusing on council as a whole, again, I think that does a disservice. It means people aren't really watching. And I mentioned this yesterday, but if you looked at our council meeting 2 weeks ago, we had 14 votes that were split votes at the last council meeting, and all 14 of them had a different combination of people who voted no.
So you're saying there's no voting blocks?
No, because that's not how municipal politics works. You know, the people, I agree with, as of the last report that was, I guess it was back in November, there was a news report about how often folks voted with one another. And actually the councillor I voted with the most was Councillor Tim Cartmel. Second most, Councillor Aaron Paquette. Well, wait a second. How does that work? Because Tim supposedly leans a little more right, Aaron supposedly leans a little more left, and yet Tim's my number one, Aaron's my number two. Well, guess what? Because municipal politics is nuanced.
Sure.
Right? What's the right wing? I think Jeremy Farkas had talked about this when he was on your show. It's like, what's the right wing way of clearing snow and what's the left wing way of clearing snow? There isn't, right? So that's the whole idea. This council, certainly they have some very strong progressive values, but there's also some councillors who you would say, oh, these are the progressive ones, who put some pretty, I would say, surprising cost-saving motions on the floor during the last budget that you'd be like, oh, I can't believe that person did that, and I'm going to vote no because I can't support it, but came from out of left field. And that's the beauty of what we do every day.
I don't know. I'm feeling like there's a stand-up routine just waiting to be written on the left wing and right wing ways to clear snow.
Absolutely. We should think of it.
The right wing way has got to be pull yourself up by the bootstraps and clear your own fucking snow. That's got to be the right wing way. I'm trying to think of what the left wing way is.
Well,
I don't know.
The left wing way's got to involve solar panels.
Panels
somehow,
for sure.
Somehow.
For sure. And John, I'm glad you said that, because as we talk to Andrew Knack, it just feels right. This is why he's such a pro. I want to remind you, but before we start talking about things like the Green Line getting canceled and infrastructure deficits and some of the work that's still in front of Councillor Knack through his last year, I want to remind you that the team at Kubi Energy is providing solar energy solutions. We didn't set that up. This is just natural. This is grassroots marketing. Powering your life as a full-service contractor for both residential and commercial solar power systems. I love when they show this on their website, kubienergy.ca. This is the Edmonton Convention Center. The whole top of it, like the whole surface facing the river valley, is all solar panels. How cool is that? It's one of the biggest installs at that time that Kubi had ever done. I mean, now, that's just old hat. They're the busiest installers in Western Canada, which means they're also always hiring. Looking for installers. You could be an apprentice, maybe eager to get your career started, or, hey, maybe you're a journey person. You've had your ticket for a long time and you're looking to be part of Canada's green energy revolution. As more people buy EVs, as more people purchase off-grid properties like cabins and cottages, more people are going green with Kubi Energy. You'll find them online at kubienergy.ca. I also want to give a shout out to those communities, friends of ours in Jasper in particular. Johnny and I so honored to be part of that Jasper Wildfire Benefit Concert on Saturday night. And
yeah,
of course,
amazing.
Wasn't that beautiful? Shout out to everybody that attended, the corporate sponsors, $255,000 raised. We think of our friends at Complete Care Restoration. They've got an entire team out there. Like, I'm talking a ton of folks that are trained, certified professionals with experience restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. You know, heaven forbid, if disaster strikes, there should be one name at the top of your list, and that's Complete Care Restoration. We've worked with them, we've seen their professionalism, and we recommend them without hesitation. And if you're looking to get maybe a little more fancy, a little more efficient, but if your investment in your home this year is on getting organized and maybe adding a little aesthetic value, that could be your primary bedroom, it could be your family's entertainment center, heck, it could be the garage. Nobody does it better than California Closets with their custom closet and storage solutions for your entire home. You can check out their beautiful work online at californiaclosets.ca. That's also where you can request a free consultation. You got nothing to lose. California Closets can work with any budget, and their work is guaranteed for life. Request that consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Hanging out with City Councillor Andrew Knack. We got you for a couple more minutes, and then business calls. You got a meeting. Life continues after announcing that you're leaving.
Absolutely.
Did you hear from a bunch of colleagues? Some of them obviously have known this is coming for a while. But
yeah.
What was one message that meant a particularly great deal to you?
Oh gosh, truly, there's just been so many from people that I've met. In particular, I would say a lot of messages from folks that I used to work with when I was on the City of Edmonton Youth Council as the council representative. Folks reaching out who have long since moved away from Edmonton, reaching back out, have been Oh, very touching, and that was almost my point where I started crying. So let's
Oh
think
yeah,
about
you've
something
been
else.
doing nothing but smile through this whole thing. I'll probably have to kick you under the table or something if we want to see tears. The Green Line story is a hell of a thing. Supposed to be about 4.7. I love when we say about. We're talking about variances of hundreds of millions on the decimal points, but about 4.7 billion. It's ballooned to about 6.2. It prompted Alberta's transportation minister, most people know Devin Dreeshen, to go 36 days after saying the funding was 100% secure to pull that funding and call it a boondoggle. Province wants to take over the project now. City Council has, in Calgary, voted to allow that to happen. I don't know if that's the word to use.
Did they have a choice?
They saw the writing on the wall. This is not a story, I mean, right now, immediately limited to Calgary it is, but this is the province stepping in again and looking to take over transportation projects. Your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, not just stepping in to take over transportation projects, but essentially stepping in to take over municipal governance as a whole, right? I mean, we've seen that through a significant reduction in infrastructure funding across this province to municipalities. We're, of course, going to see that with the introduction of Bill 20 and the introduction of political parties. This is just over and over again. And again, this is why it's so odd. I mean, a government that says that they're conservative and yet is looking to control everything, that municipalities do. And so in Calgary in particular, that's really frustrating. I mean, gosh, had we got the same provincial funding back in sort of late 2018, early 2019 for LRT to the west end of the city, which I know not everyone loves right now because of the construction, but it's going to be really good when we're all done it there. But we went out right after we got that funding and put the project out to tender and was able to sign a contract by late 2020. Thank goodness, because we could have been in the exact same situation if we didn't get out to tender as early as we did. Because these big projects, what often happens is that you just keep pushing it back because you want every little report. The provincial and federal governments obviously they want to do their due diligence, but their due diligence often adds so many years to these projects that by the time you're ready to sign the contract, well, of course, things are going to be way more 3 or 4 years later than they were 4 years ago. And so there has to be a faster way to do things. And this goes back to, if you just provided proper infrastructure funding to all municipalities and then let them make their own decisions because they have been democratically elected by the citizens they represent to do the work. And yet we constantly run into this thing. And again, it's not just a provincial issue, it's a federal issue as well. It's always, let's put in this grant and this grant and this grant. Just put in the money and let the municipalities do the work that they need to do, because we can do it quickly if we're given the chance.
Do you think that the general public, I'm asking, this is such a broad stroke question, but like the average person supports the notion that we should be making public transit investments to this magnitude?
Absolutely. I mean, to this day, again, I think about the West End LRT here in the city of Edmonton. And yeah, there are communities I represent, especially the more mature ones, where it is more of a 50-50 split of people who really hate the idea of it and people really like it. But particularly as I get further out, which is what's probably the most interesting, is the more suburban communities that I represent are the ones who are more supportive of the LRT, even though they are more likely to be in a car-dependent neighborhood right now. But I think they see the potential for that. They see the opportunity. These are where the young families are, and they're thinking about their kids. Are they going to have to buy a third and fourth car for their kids to get to high school, to get to post-secondary, or could there be another option? And I think broadly, people understand that it is impossible to build your way out of congestion, right? I keep picking on, there's one great example from just outside Houston, Texas, the Katy Freeway. That was a $3 billion project back in 2011. They widened their freeway from 6 lanes to 23 lanes at its widest point. And 3 years after the completion of that project, congestion was 33% worse. You can't build your way out of congestion. You need alternatives. That doesn't mean you ignore roadways. We're investing more in
the Yellowhead project right now is enormous.
Twilliger. We're investing more in roads. This council, this lefty progressive council, is investing more in roadways than any other council by a large margin on a per year basis. And we're also investing in alternatives because we know it can't just be roads. It has to be alternatives. And I find that over and over again. And I think, again, even though a smaller percentage of people use transit and mass transit, people know that's what major cities have. We're a city over 1 million people. We're now over 1.1 million. You have to have these options. People need to have alternatives, especially at a time where affordability is what it is. What if you could shrink from a 2-car household to a 1-car household? You could save $10,000 a year on that. if the options exist and they're actually viable, because right now they're not viable in a lot of parts of our city and other cities.
Jasmine Mann, the councillor down in Calgary, has been tweeting about this. I saw she tweeted congratulations to you, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet. But she on her Twitter account, I'll just show it here now for our YouTube audience, but she shows like kind of like a 2-minute video of just some of the LRT construction that's been happening. And she says, if you're wondering where $1.5 billion of our taxes have gone, here's a peek. She says a lot of people think the Green Line is still a conceptual idea, but it's not. It's an active construction project that the UCP just killed, her words. She says the big cost of transit projects aren't the trains, though those have been purchased. It's actually land acquisition, utility relocation, infrastructure, she says, like you're seeing in the video. We talked about this on the show the other day. It's obvious, and the numbers of homes, businesses, properties that are acquired, knocked down to make way for these trains. She says it impacts the jobs of 1,000 people right now, the future of every one of us. And then she, of course, talks about the residents that she represents who will be affected by any alteration of the Green Line LRT plan. What do you think Calgary does? And like where the fate of this, I'm asking you to speculate, but this it's pretty wild to see a construction project just halted, a project of this magnitude, because like you alluded to, and it's probably obvious, with every passing month, let alone every passing 6 months, you're talking about, I mean, $6.2 billion right now. What happens when it's 7? What happens when it's 7.5?
Exactly. And I mean, I couldn't imagine, had we, going back to the Valley Line West for a moment, which is a $2.7 billion project, what if we didn't sign the contract in late 2020? What would it be today? I mean, I would only want to begin to imagine what that'd be. So in Calgary, yeah, I like, this is one of those situations where it's not like this shouldn't exist. You need to have that type of infrastructure. In a city as large as Calgary, they need that. So we're not talking about if it's going to be built. It's always a matter of when. And I just can't see the logic in continuing to push this back. It's only going to get more expensive. There's no way around it. And so why aren't we investing, especially when the commitment had been made, like we say, just about a month ago or just over a month ago, that said, yep, money's in the bank, you got the guarantee. That's really hard to then suddenly say, oh, yeah, just kidding. Now we're not going to do it. What does that mean for people who want to bid on this, who are hiring staff, who are doing the work to do this project? And scale that down. What about a small municipality that wants to do a sewer line upgrade and has just received a grant? Should they be worried that that funding is going to be pulled as well? Because that's the type of message this sends to municipalities across this province, that we're not willing to keep up with growth. I mean, the Premier said it herself in February. We're not going to keep up with population growth. How does that make sense? We're behind in schools, in hospitals, in transit, in utility infrastructure. Literally every municipality is struggling to keep up with this growth, and yet we've chosen not to keep up with that. How does that make sense? Especially when we have a surplus of $4.3 billion last fiscal year. We're trending another surplus now, and we had an $11.5 billion surplus 2 years ago. And yet we're choosing not to keep up with population growth to actually help address the folks' quality of life. How does that make sense?
I mean, it's interesting. This will be a debate that people will have, and unfortunately, a lot of times these debates play out with very real impacts on a lot of people's lives, and people can talk about. I mean, you alluded to it yourself, keeping property taxes artificially low, but there's a lot of people right now that are also, I know you know this, stretched to the max.
Oh yeah,
like more than 50% of the population polled. There's various polls out there. People are saying that they're concerned, or they're having very real trouble right now meeting their monthly expenses. If you think 1 in 2 families is feeling a pinch right now, you understand why there's pushback on a lot of things that people either don't understand or a lot of things people don't agree with when it comes to expenditures and taxation. Which
is why it's important for us to know, yes, there's only one taxpayer, and that's an important part of every conversation. But it's also why, I made a motion back in June to say, can we finally transition housing and homelessness properly back to the order of government that's responsible for it, right? That is the provincial government. Because last year we spent $91 million on areas that relate to housing and homelessness. That means we've essentially double taxed people to pay for something that isn't our responsibility. It's morally the right thing to do because people are literally dying on our streets. But when you've got a surplus, we're not talking about taking more money. We're talking about the proper distribution of the tax dollars that exist. When you have a surplus, it means you have taken more money than you needed to provide the services that you were currently providing. But then you have to ask the question, are there services that you should have been providing that you've chosen not to? to give yourself sort of that nice bonus. I go back to think about somebody's household situation, right? If suddenly you got a bonus, but your roof is leaking, are you going to leave the bonus in the bank? Or are you going to say, you know what, my roof is leaking, and if I don't take care of that, it's going to create a more expensive problem. You actually, in that scenario, wouldn't be finding new money. You'd be using that money that came, that bonus money that came, on things that actually matter. That's what we need to be doing, because we're falling behind. You mentioned Calgary's water line, right? Calgary's not the only city that's dealing with utility infrastructure challenges like this. This is an issue in most municipalities across this province. Almost every municipality I tour, that's the number one issue they bring up, their utility infrastructure and how they don't have enough funding to actually provide that right now. And yet we have a surplus. So we don't have to increase property taxes to address these. We just need the money that has already been set aside, that has already been taxed from Albertans and corporations and everyone there, to go to the services that people expect so that they can actually get along with their day-to-day life and not have to think about, am I allowed to have a shower today because is there enough water in the system?
We visited my parents down in Calgary last week, and I didn't realize they're back on water restrictions again, which is, it's wild. And I know that should be a wake-up call, I think, for the entire province. I've asked Premier about it, and she says it's on her radar. But here's the interesting thing. It's like, you look at this and it's like, let me ask you this in the form of a question.
Yep.
In your opinion, is this pure optics on behalf of the provincial government being able to run a surplus as opposed to a deficit? Like, is it, or is there more to it?
Like, I want to give the benefit of the doubt, because I genuinely believe, and there's a lot of great people in the UCP who I genuinely believe are there to serve and are there to make people's lives better. What I think is frustrating is that when I go, I think about the work that groups like Alberta municipalities have done that have identified the infrastructure deficit. I was just in a meeting of wearing my Alberta municipalities hat, but for the rural municipalities of Alberta out in Camrose, and how they just released a report, RMA just released a report about the amount of money that needs to go into reconstructing bridges across this province of about $400 million per year in order to catch up on what is needed. And so when you have these real tangible projects, these aren't frivolous things, right? Bridges are not frivolous. Utility infrastructures aren't frivolous. I would argue transit's not frivolous. These are things that matter. And when you've got a surplus and you're not investing in those things, I can't figure out why. I'm not even saying take the entire surplus and invest it in those things. But certainly we can be doing better than we're doing now, because, I represent suburban ridings that have packed schools, that kids in their own community can't even attend their own local school anymore and now have to bus an hour out of their neighborhood because they can't attend their local school. They're on a lottery in their own community. We're one of the richest provinces in this country. Is that how we should be tackling issues right now? It feels really odd to me. It feels like we're setting ourselves up for a massive, massive infrastructure deficit like we saw back in the Klein era, right? And he did a lot of great things. He paid down the debt, but at what cost to the infrastructure that we needed across the city? So I know they want to help, but when folks are putting well thought out, rational arguments from across the political spectrum, folks on the right, center, and left are all saying the same things, and we're not doing it, I can't understand why.
Do you think that Naheed Nenshi, or let me ask you, how do you think Naheed Nenshi would operate differently as Premier than Danielle Smith?
I think any time you've had somebody that's served in municipal government, where you're dealing with these day-to-day issues on a regular basis, it gives you a very different perspective of the world. It's because, again, if your water line isn't working, that's just such a critical quality of life issue that you don't even think twice about having to tackle that, right? We did a couple of years ago a flood mitigation program of about $1.5 billion. It didn't get a lot of attention because it's built into your utility rate, but it was probably one of the most important investments we made in making sure that our communities can handle the changing weather patterns. These are things we just do because they're the right thing to do. And I think anyone who's served in that role, in that municipal governance role, whether it be from a big city or, frankly, I'll go and I'll pick some of the councillors in the smallest villages, they all are dealing with the exact same issues, maybe at a different scale. And it gives you a different way of looking at it. And again, going back to that nonpartisan system, it allows you to say, hey, let's go talk to the community, talk to people from across party lines and say, here are some real challenges we're tackling. How do we work on this together? What are the right decisions we should be making as a community to try to tackle these? And so I think he has that potential. But they have some municipal councillors, former municipal councillors on the UCP, who I think believe that as well. But that's part of this broken partisan system, is that you can be a great municipal councillor and then get sucked up in a partisan system that says the party has told me to vote this way, therefore I cannot do anything else.
That is longtime Edmonton City Councillor for now. Well, you'll always be a long time. You'll just turn into a long-time former Edmonton. But listen, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for taking some of our questions. Obviously, we'll expect a follow-up announcement at some point when the time is right. And in the meantime, let me just congratulate you, on a career that you should be proud of at Edmonton City Hall. And there's a lot of people, Councillor, that I talk to, and we talk about across the political spectrum. I have friends that are left-wing lunatics. I have friends that are right-wing nut jobs, and I have a whole bunch of friends in between. And I'd have to rack my brain to think of a single instance when somebody has said something scathing and personal about you. You've taken some flack and fire for council decisions, and that's normal. That comes with the territory, but I do think you're one of the good guys, and I look forward to seeing where you choose to take your talent and experience next.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
As a candidate for the Alberta NDP under Naheed Nenshi in the next election. Listen, you have a meeting that you need to get to, Councillor, so thank you very much for doing this. I'm running you right up against the clock, so I apologize. Hey, in the meantime, friends, let me direct you to ryanjespersen.com. This is where I know a lot of you find the show on a weekly basis. That's where you can link directly to our live streams on YouTube and, of course, on the Mixlr audio app as well, presented by our friends at California Closets. We make it nice and easy to find our social media accounts as well on X. There, I said it. On X, on Instagram, and on TikTok. And don't forget, you can also find your Real Talk merch there. We have snapback caps, T-shirts, all kinds of cool stuff, including the mugs that you see us rolling with on set, the official Real Talk mug. All of it, by the way, made in Canada and shipped right to your home. That's also our website where you can join our newsletter. Sign up for free. You just give us your email address. We never sell it to anybody else, and it's the best way that you can stay in touch with what's coming up on the show, including past highlights you may have missed. You'll find it all at ryanjespersen.com. One of the good guys, Councillor Andrew Knack, keeping it classy, deflecting, but in all seriousness, getting to the serious issues that he was asked about, and the timing's got to be right on announcing next steps for anybody. So we'll respect that. But this is a story in Alberta politics with Knack stepping away from Edmonton City Council. Another big story that was making news across the country, Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert, convicted of multiple charges in August related to their role in the border blockade at Coutts, Alberta. You remember this one. This is one that obviously tied up the border crossing, tied up the economy, but also, of course, saw international news coverages when RCMP, acting on a tip, discovered a cache of weapons, of ammunition, of body armor. There were pipe bombs there. I'm not a guns and ammo guy, so I can't get too specific about it, but I saw somebody leave a comment online that said something along the lines of, you are free to speak and protest whatever and however you like, but you can't bring pipe bombs.
No.
And these two were sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for their involvement in that. I do want to note that one of the two men here, this is Anthony Olenek, reading from a prepared statement, told the Court of King's Bench before he was sentenced that the time that has already spent behind bars has changed him. He says his solemn weapon is now love. He said to the court, "Stay strong, live free, spread love, not war." He said, "I've gained a stronger understanding into what divine destiny awaits me." Interesting. "I will continue to help others with spreading truth, happiness, and joy, unifying people together by using love as my solemn weapon." Now, neither of these two is going to serve their full sentence. The judge gave them nearly 4 years credit, Johnny, for time already served. They were obviously held in custody since they were arrested back in February 22. Interesting to see the public commentary on this. Obviously, the supporters of that border blockade feel that they shouldn't have been charged in the first place. to get real, I mean, a lot of them feel like Alberta's premier should have done more here. You remember this, all these allegations of interference back in the day. It was a story that plagued Danielle Smith for quite some time. You'll, of course, remember the CBC reporting around that, then the CBC walking it back. I mean, this has been a story that has carried some great drama and has held the national attention. We've thrown it out onto our Twitter at Real Talk RJ, and we'll be taking a look at this. We always set our unofficial, unscientific Twitter polls to go for 24 hours to get enough time for a meaningful response. Got just over 100 votes right now. 90% of people say that they feel like the punishment fit the crime. 9.5% of respondents to this point say they think that these men are punished more heavily than they should be. This is obviously a big story. Like you said, man, you know, you're bringing guns and ammo and body armor to a protest. I don't know that the general public opinion is going to be anything different than we need to protect general society from this type of mayhem or potential mayhem.
No, and I'm someone who's all for protest, and I just think this one went too far. You know, shutting down, you know, supply chains and you know, stockpiling weapons, that's the scary shit. You know, this isn't like, and I'm not saying it's any better, but, you know, like, if you're going to protest. You want to throw soup on the Mona Lisa and you know, like, whatever you got to do. But this obviously was too far. And, I mean, the man himself, one of them, regretting his actions, knowing that this went too far, okay? You want to exercise your right to protect yourself. This was a stockpile of weapons, and I don't think a pipe bomb is ever a form of protection, right? So
yeah. Mark says, Mark Doran in the chat says, if anything, the sentences are too light. A Green Tomato says, yeah, protest, but don't bring weapons. Yeah, I mean, that just seems like kind of a basic, you know what I mean? But you know, I don't know. Justin says he doesn't think they got enough time behind bars. Travis says lock him up and throw away the key. I don't know. You know, I mean, interesting to see that they were not convicted on that charge of conspiring to kill police officers. Found guilty of mischief and found guilty of the weapons charges, but not guilty of conspiracy to kill RCMP officers. I'm not. Don't read too much into what I'm saying there. I'm just saying they weren't convicted of it.
Well,
whether or not there was a plan, there was not enough evidence to convict.
Yeah, and in the beginning, I remember the men saying, like, a lot of these weapons were used for hunting, and then the rest of them, they said, like I was just saying, we're for defense, we're for protecting themselves
against who?
But this is a
police.
This isn't one firearm in a glove box just in case something happens because you are at, you know, a pretty fired up protest. This is stockpiles of weapons in two separate trailers where pipe bombs and body armor were found. So that's a little more than protection, I would think. Yeah,
no kidding. If this is resonating with you, if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. Talk at ryanjespersen.com. I don't know how you argue the other side, but nonetheless, we'll hear you out. Another story that, of course, everybody's paying attention to, I think, is as we're talking here on this September 10th, hours ahead of what'll no doubt be a highly rated debate between Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, as November 5th approaches. The two of them essentially deadlocked in polling. They're basically tied. Had an interesting conversation with Max Fawcett, lead columnist for Canada's National Observer, on the 9th of September. That was our yesterday episode. Check it out for his take on how he thinks that debate's going to go. Are you going to set aside time? Are you going to carve aside some time to watch this one? Is this something that like captures your interest or attention?
And I know Max was talking about this yesterday. I feel like no. I feel like a lot of people, we're busy. We want to spend time with our friends and family, and we know that we're gonna get the highlights on TikTok, on X, on Instagram Reels. I'm gonna see all the best parts tomorrow, and probably the best part is gonna be posted millions of times. So will I tune in if I have a minute and I know, okay, now it's going down, I have a few minutes, maybe I might turn on CNN, I might turn on whatever, MSNBC, I might turn on whatever, Fox, and just check out what people are saying. But most of us, I know most of us, are just going to get up in the morning, go right to our news feed, and it's all going to be right there at the top for us. Right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know, I just kind of feel like if it were, and I don't know if I should even say this because it's kind of cynical, but if I felt like there was going to be meaningful policy discussion on anything, if I felt like maybe it was going to be less personal, than before, then maybe we might sort of tune in and like for the entire thing.
Well,
look,
listen.
I'm curious to hear two different solutions to the two different approaches
That's not
to
gonna
the
happen,
American
though.
economy
That's
over the
not
next
gonna
5
happen.
years, but it's not going to happen.
No.
It is going to be though for people that love watching shows like like Monday Night Raw. Here you have something on a Tuesday that will give you probably much of the same vibe.
Yeah, and Real Talkers, be sure to tune in here because we will have the best 30 to 1.5 minutes of the entire debate. We will cut it down,
sure.
and you'll see it here. So if you miss it, tune in, and we'll have it.
Well, this is a great time for us to let you know as well. We're going to be taking a couple of days, and we got some exciting stuff coming down the pike. But that means that our September 11th episode, this is going to be Wednesday, September 11th, will be the final episode of this week. So that also means that there's going to be an early edition of The Flamethrower presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. So whether you're inspired by the American election debate, or maybe our conversation with Councillor Knack, maybe it was Max Fawcett that did it for you earlier in this week, or maybe it was some of our coverage last week, including an episode. I just loved it. Erica Barudis and Cheryl Oates brought it on Friday, the two hosts of The Discourse, back at it, taking on the top political stories across the country. Let us know what you think. And if there's, some particular heat behind it, you could find your email read during The Flamethrower. That'll be at the conclusion of the 11th of September. That'll be our episode featuring, we're going to do a super fun Real Talk Roundtable. Yes, we'll talk some American politics. Yes, we'll bring you some highlights, but 3 nominees for the CCMAs. Our home city of Edmonton is proud to be hosting the Canadian Country Music Awards, and we've got 3 people that are going to be joining us here in studio. I'm excited about it. Should we say who they are? We can say who they are.
Yeah.
Haley Benedict, who just signed Haley B, just signed a big deal. I mean, she signed a record deal literally this week, and so we're super excited to ask her about that. JJ Shiplet, one of my favorite singers on planet Earth, is going to join us, as will Dan Clapson. You're going to go, Dan Clapson, like the famous national food writer? Yeah. He's a CCMA nominee, so we got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. Before we wrap, I do want to let you know that Real Talk is proud to be supporting GEDfest. That's coming up on the 19th of October. If you're a big fan of the Tragically Hip, who isn't? You're going to want to join us in Edmonton at Midway Music Hall or down in Calgary. They're going to do something awesome as well. Calgary's got a fabulous event going on 8th Avenue. They're going to have a ton of fun. You can find out all the details at gedfest.ca. It's 2 different hip cover bands. They have a third event going on in Kelowna, by the way, for our BC listeners, all raising money for a couple of wonderful charities, in particular here in Edmonton, the Alberta Cancer Foundation, the Ben Stelter Foundation. Oh, Ben. Much love to the Stelter family. We're going to do what we can to support them by rocking up to the music of the hip. Hypnotical is Edmonton's quintessential Tragically Hip cover band, and they're going to be performing at Midway Music Hall. We're going to have an absolute blast. Calgary has its own event. You can find out all the details again, including where the money's going, and all of the other details for the night coming up. That's the 19th of October. We're going to be celebrating the Saturday night closest to the anniversary of Gord's passing. So that's why it's that night. October 19th, GEDfest, that's G-E-D. Gordon, do you know what his middle name is by chance? E? What would be your guess? Gordon E. Downey. Any guesses?
No.
Edgar.
Edgar.
That's a good name.
Oh, that's great.
Gordon Edgar Downey. What a beauty, Gord. We miss you. GEDfest.ca coming up the 19th of October. Would love to see you there. So there you have it. CCMA Real Talk Roundtable coming up. An early edition of The Flamethrower. And if you're going, well, hang on, what else is coming up down the line with the show? Because we've got great episodes planned. Make sure, like we told you on our website, to sign up for our newsletter. That's how you stay in the know. It's at ryanjespersen.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you'll get those exclusive scoops before anybody else. Thanks for being a part of this episode. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for telling your friends. We'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.